Okay, welcome everyone to being a charity trustee. I'm going to share a screen, which is a PowerPoint presentation. So I'll do that now. So hopefully everyone can see that. Okay. What you can do is, if you want to hide everybody else and just concentrate on me, you could just change to your view. So you can do that usually by looking at view, and then you can just say speaker against screen, and it will just be me, just so that you don't have lots of people and you can just look at me. You could even turn me off if you like and just listen to me talking. Okay, so this is Trustee Week, if you didn't realise. So once a year, at the beginning of November, there is a week devoted to encouraging, promoting, supporting trustees, and a lot of organisations get involved, very much backed by the Charity Commission. Look on their website, there's quite a lot of interesting information and resources, and tomorrow, if you've got some time, there is probably some activities or some seminars or whatever you might be able to join in. But there's a lot of other resources on there that you might helpful in your role as a trustee. If you don't know who we are, I think you all do, but I work for Community Action Network. We're a registered charity that supports other voluntary and community organisations and volunteering within Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. And our mission is to empower the voluntary sector, enable volunteering and to involve communities. We're mostly funded by the local council and by the local NHS. I suppose the cynics amongst us might think they do that because they hopefully, by having a strong voluntary and community sector, it will save them money. But I couldn't possibly comment on that view. And we do this in a variety of ways. We have quite a comprehensive website. We send out e-network newsletters and emails on a regular basis. We offer opportunities for training and networking. The last 2 years, almost exclusively online, but who knows, if we ever get beyond Plan Z, we might go back to having some face-to-face stuff again. But look out, and I think actually all your organisations are probably members of CAN, and so we'll get stuff by email about what we're doing. If not, send me an email and I'll double check to see whether you're a member or not. And it's very quick and easy to do, and it's free. So being a charity trustee, we think it's very important because charity trustees are one of the things that helps define the voluntary and community sector, and particularly charities. It's because charities are run by people who do it because they've got a passion to make a difference. They don't do it because they want a job. They don't do it because they've got to, because the law says they have to do it. They make a decision that they want to make a difference, and that generally they'll do it for free, offering their time and energy for free. And that's one of the defining differences, we think, between the private sector and the statutory sector. They're there to make a difference with no financial gain about themselves. And that's why it's very important, we think, to encourage and support and give advice to trustees. So we run this course 3 times a year. We've also just launched a survey of trustees of charities that are based in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, so that we get a better idea about how much time they give, what their makeup in terms of gender, race, sexuality, and also asking them what areas they want support and advice in and how they'd like it to be offered. Tomorrow, hopefully tomorrow or Monday, I'll be sending you a copy of this presentation plus lots of other fact sheets, and I'll also include the link to that trustee survey for you to take part in. It's going to be open to the rest of November, so it's not as if it's going to just be here for this week. This is me, and these are my contact details. And actually, after tonight, if you've got any questions or anything you want to talk about, then you can contact me. Obviously, my email address is there, and my mobile number is the best one to get it on. The office number is being sort of staffed remotely, but it can take time to get to me. So the quickest way of getting hold of me is by email or using my mobile number. My role is I give most of the one-to-one advice and support to frontline voluntary and community organisations. My background is I'm not a trained lawyer, I'm not a trained accountant. It's just that for the last 44 years, 45 years, I've been involved in voluntary and community organisations. Most of my working life, I've worked for charities, either small or large. I've been the chief exec of a couple of charity organisations in my work life. And I'm currently the trustee of a small childcare charity, and I'm also the treasurer. So really my knowledge is based on having to learn it on the job in those 45 odd years, and keeping up to date with changes in law and good practice, and hopefully distilling that down for people on the ground. Okay, if there's one thing to take away from tonight is this basic principle: always act in the best interest of your charity and its beneficiaries. And basically, if you as a charity trustee basically use that whenever you make your decisions, you will be covered in law. Okay, Simone, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I'm really sorry, but there's a really interfering noise. I don't know where it's coming from. It sounds like somebody's either fiddling with a pen or like when somebody brushes against a comb with their thumb. It's that grrr, there's a noise. That's it.
I think everyone else is. I think everyone is muted other than me.
I don't know if it's you then.
Can anyone else hear sort of like sound?
It sounds like a comb on a thumb on a comb. You know that.
Petula, are you muted?
I've just unmuted myself to answer you to say yes, we can hear it.
Oh, you're right. Okay. I wonder if it's me, but I can't hear it.
It's not your mouse, is it?
It's quite a way away because I'm using a thing, so my microphone's up here, so it's not as if it's the laptop.
Right, because it did stop intermittently now, so I don't know if it's the microphone, maybe.
I don't know if it's the microphone on your shirt then.
Oh, it could be, yeah.
On your shirt or a button or something. Sorry, Steve.
Okay, is that, yes, that's right. Is that any better? What about if I keep talking? Can you still hear it?
It stopped.
If I keep moving my head, can you hear stuff? Is it all right?
It's okay. It's fine now.
Yeah, that's better.
Maybe it's my fleece catching on the microphone. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I was going to say in a minute anyway. I'm going to do this is mostly talk and chalk, I'm afraid, or talk and PowerPoint. But at any point in time, if you got a question, then ask it. Either there's only the 5 of you, so basically you can just butt in, or you can, if you know the protocol, you could just put your hand up like Simone did. Okay. So it says this is the basic principle. If it's the one thing you come away with tonight, you're basically done and dusted. So really, I could just stop there. But you've paid good money, you've put aside tonight, so I'm going to expand it for the sort of next 1.5 hours. Really, what does this mean in practice for you? And this is what I'm going to try and cover. Hopefully some of you have seen this. This was all on the blurb about tonight's course, about what's a charity, and therefore what a trustee is, the legal responsibilities, possible liabilities, and how to be effective trustee, and help and support. And like I said earlier, I'll send this PowerPoint to you again in the next day or two. But also when you go through this, you'll see that there are some references to an H, which is handout. So I'll be sending those to you, which will help unpick maybe into some of the detail of some of the things I'll be talking about this evening. I've talked about you asking questions. I might tell you park that because we'll come to that later, but jump in and ask a question. I think when you booked, people were asked about what was the most what you wanted to know about tonight, and nearly everyone just said they just wanted a basic overview of roles and responsibilities. So hopefully you'll get that flavour tonight. We'll have about a sort of 10-minute break, maybe around 8 o'clock, and then we definitely finish by 9. It depends how many questions you ask, but that's not a reason for you not to ask any questions, so you can get back to whatever you want to do. Okay, so first of all, I was going to say, what is a charity? Anybody want to give me any ideas? What makes a charity a charity?
Shall I jump in? Sorry.
Carol.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So my understanding of a charity is that it is an organisation which is set up to provide some kind of beneficial support or something of benefit to the community, to individuals within their community. And it's on a sort of benevolent basis. So it's to help others. And that's my understanding of it.
Right. Anyone else got any other ideas?
Yeah, I'd say virtually that, except a charity is pretty much a business or a company, but it's Petula said, with the focus not to make a profit for itself, but to offer something that is beneficial to other people outside that business.
Okay, right. Okay. Anyone else want to throw in an idea? Be brave.
I agree with Petula, so I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay. Now, why it's important for you as trustees to understand this is because at the end of the day, you're the custodian of your organisation, and you must make sure that it always remains a charity. That's one of the key roles of a charity trustee, is to always make sure that their charity is exclusively charitable. So that's why I spend a bit of time talking about what is a charity, because you've got to understand that. So, and it's very well established in English law, and it's got a mix, like most laws in the UK, of what's called common law. So there is no statute, there is no act of parliament that says this is illegal. It's just that it's recognised that something is wrong and is against the law. So for instance, murder, there is no act of parliament that says that murder is illegal. It's just common law that is recognised in the courts that murder is an illegal activity. In the same way, there is an awful lot of common law about what makes a charity and not a charity, and how charities should operate. But there are also acts of parliament. There is another one just being debated at the moment, really an update, and the one before was 2011. But the first act of parliament was 1606, so during Queen Elizabeth I's reign. And then, of course, there's quite a lot of case law, so that's decisions that have been made in court and usually gets used as precedents. So there's this stuff about exclusively for charitable purposes. So there are actually currently 13 listed charitable purposes, and some are pretty obvious, and they're the old ones. It's the relief of poverty, the promotion of education, the relief of sickness, and actually the other one is the promotion of religion. Originally it was promotion of Christianity, but it's been broadened to be basically of religion. But there are other ones there now as well. So community and rural regeneration, promotion of sport for the public benefit, promotion of arts, promotion of community capacity building, racial understanding and anti-discrimination is another one, and so on. So 13 of them. because what it is that not everything that's good for society is necessarily charitable. And there are some things that definitely can't be charitable. And one thing is, for instance, is campaigning work. So you can't be a charity if your raison d'etre is just to campaign, either to get a law to be followed or to change the law. So, for instance, Friends of the Earth and Greenpeace are not registered charities, nor is Liberty. Liberty is the national organisation that, you know, campaigns for human rights and so on, and they can't be a charity because basically their focus is on either getting laws changed or to make sure that government and other agencies follow the law. They might have charitable arms, which might be educational, and they might, nearly all of them do, like Greenpeace does have. There is a Greenpeace charity, but all it does is it produces educational materials around the environment, and similarly Friends of the Earth, and similarly Liberty. And so, but quite a few said a thing about benefits, how benefits to society. So in charity speak, this is the public benefit. So that charities have got to create public benefit. And what that means is that it's got to be something more than probably a few people. So it can't just be friends and family. You've got to make the benefit available to the community as far as you can. So, for instance, I said one of the charitable purposes is the promotion of faith. In the last few years, there's been a very old Christian denomination in Britain called the Plymouth Brethren, the exclusive Plymouth Brethren. So they came around during the Commonwealth, during the Revolution. And the Charity Commission, they were registered, but then the Charity Commission actually investigated them and said, well, actually, you're not promoting yourself to the wider public. For the exclusive brethren, you've almost got to be born into the church. So they don't go out and ask for new people to become a member of the church. Their services are not open to the public. So basically that got taken away from them. And there are other organisations that have been charities where in fact their charity status has been taken away from them because they couldn't show that there was enough public benefit. There was too much private benefit, either, for instance, quite often to families, you know, where maybe family members were being employed or their businesses were being paid to do stuff like marketing or PR or stuff like that. But it's a bit of a sort of, it's sometimes difficult to know when private becomes public. So for instance, a rule of thumb is that if a residents association cannot be a charity because it's going to only benefit a small group of people, maybe living in a street or in a housing block. But if they can cover something like 5,000 population, and usually you call them a community association rather than a residents association, then actually they probably could get charity status. Other things are, for instance, that allotments can't become charities because, again, it's seen that they're only benefiting a small number of individuals who have to be members, i.e. growing on the allotment. So you as trustees have always got to ask yourself, are we creating enough public benefit? Are we restricting the difference we're making to too few people, not because of resources? So it's obviously fine if you haven't got enough money to benefit 300 people when you can only benefit 100 people, that's understandable. But if you put artificial barriers in place to reduce the benefits, then actually your charity status could be at risk. Okay. And you as trustees have to report on your public benefits once a year publicly, and that's in something called the Trustees Annual Report. So charities every year like most organisations, have to produce accounts. But importantly, charities also have to produce a trustees annual report that goes with the figures. And that's a written report about the difference the work of the charity has made in that past year. You know, okay, your accounts bit might say, yeah, we raised 100 grand, we spent 90 grand. In charity terms, though, there'll be a so what difference has that made? And that's why you have the trustees annual report to say what difference the work has made. And again, you as trustees need to make sure that actually that will give a reader a good idea of the public benefit that's been created. And the third thing is under the jurisdiction of the High Court. And just for you to understand that, why it's England and Wales, is because charity law is different in Scotland and Northern Ireland, and they have their own laws and their own regulator. Luckily, the laws are almost very similar, but they are technically, well, they are legally different jurisdictions. And this is it, you know, charities exist to make a difference, to create public benefit, which is what some of you were saying. And that's the thing you need to keep thinking about, is that we're not raising money to keep the organisation going, to keep people in jobs, to actually create more shareholder value, which is what private sector companies have to think about. It's about actually making a difference to either the beneficiaries that your charity was set up to help. Now, that's another thing for you to understand, this word beneficiaries, because in all the Charity Commission guidance, they'll talk about beneficiaries, because some charities don't benefit people. Can you think of any charities that actually benefit other than people?
Dogs.
Dogs, yeah. Anyone else?
RSPCA.
Yeah, that's animals, yes.
Yeah.
Any other charities you can think of that don't necessarily benefit people?
Environmental?
Yes, which ones were you thinking of?
Oh.
Do you know of any local ones? Large ones? Okay, I'll put you out your misery. Oh, Simone's saying, yes, what?
I'm just thinking, is it Keep Britain Tidy one?
Yes, actually they are, yeah. So I was thinking of Dorset Wildlife Trust, for instance, yeah, very big.
Right.
And of course, if any of you have been following the press about, you know, wokeness within a national charity and AGMs, have you been following that in the press? National Trust.
Oh God, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The National Trust beneficiaries are buildings and countryside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get rid of that trail.
Yeah.
And
Anyway. Right, and I'll send you, there's a link here, there's a hyperlink to what's called CC4, so it's a Charity Commission guidance about what makes a charity a charity. Ooh. Right, luckily none of you said what makes a charity is a charity number. That's not. There are plenty and plenty of unregistered charities because they're too small. Which is a pain in England and Wales, whereas in Scotland and Northern Ireland, all charities have to register with their regulator, whereas in England and Wales, some of you may know that this is a magic number of £5,000 before organisations sometimes can register with the Charity Commission. That's just for administrative reasons, nothing at all in charity law about why that's so. So there are plenty of very small unregistered charities, but they are still charities in law and they're still covered by all the Charity Acts and the guidance of the Charity Commission, and the Charity Commission can still investigate them. There are also quite a lot of charities that can't register with the Charity Commission. Simone, where are you sitting?
I'm at work. I'm in the award office.
Right.
So I've just finished a long day. Well, not quite. So we're supposed to finish at 7:30, but I've had permission so I could do this here to be 7. So I'm in the ward office. So technically still at work.
Okay, so that's within the NHS?
Yes.
Right, okay.
At Bournemouth Hospital.
Bournemouth Hospital, which is a charity.
It is.
But it doesn't have to register with the Charity Commission, so it doesn't have a magic number. Does anybody know of any other sort of what could be seen as statutory organisations that are actually also charities in law?
Universities.
Yes, universities, and another big shed load of other educational establishments called
Private school. They're losing them though, aren't they?
well, private schools, but actually no. Well, actually, I wasn't thinking of that.
Well,
All academies and all free schools are charities in law.
but I think it wasn't there. Isn't it from some months ago? They were saying about the private school. Well, say public.
Well, yeah.
They were going to lose.
Will I still be alive when I've heard that so many times before?
All right.
You know, yeah, but so there are lots of organisations that actually are charities, but in fact don't have to register with the Charity Commission. And actually, if you are governor, for instance, of an academy or a free school, you should understand that you are also charity trustees as well as being school governors. Okay, so we have a police force, which is the Charity Commission. Sort of, it's funded by government. It got severely cut during when all the cuts happened to statutory services some years ago, but actually this year it's just been given a bit more. But actually it's a branch of government, and it must be sent certain information. If the Charity Commission asks an organisation that's a charity to be sent stuff, you are under duty to send it in, and it's a criminal offence. Some charity trustees were found guilty of contempt of court last year for not doing so. It was a sort of test case. Everyone, you know, understood that if you didn't cooperate with the Charity Commission, it could be an illegal activity. But this was the test case that showed, in fact, that the courts recognised that as well. They can do various things. They can issue official warnings to charities to stop doing something or to do something. And they have the power to disqualify people from being a trustee or senior employee up to 15 years. And usually once a month, you will see a charity that's been investigated where someone has been disqualified. A chair of a charity has just been disqualified for 15 years, basically for an awful lot of private benefit. The charity was raising money. It paid for the mortgage of the house that he was living in rent-free with his family. And it was also paying for other things like a car and so on. Was told about it, but didn't do anything about it. So basically it's been disbarred from being a trustee for 15 years. And basically also can't become a senior employee of a charity either. And basically they can carry out these things called statutory inquiries, and they become public. So you don't want this to happen. The Charity Commission announces each time that it opens a statutory inquiry. It details what they're going to look into. They do their investigation, and then they produce a report, which again is in the public domain. And so, you know, the Charity Commission are people to take cognizance of. They have an awful lot of stuff on their website, but it's quite difficult to find sometimes. But it is the place to go for definitive advice. Trouble is, you can't really talk to them about stuff. They will just tend to say to you, go and look on the website if you've got a question or query. So if you have got a question, a good place to start is with me, for instance, and hopefully I can give you an answer. If not, I'll tell you, no, you need to get something a bit more expert. But most things I can sort out for you. Okay, anybody got any questions about what makes a charity a charity? No? Great, okay. So being a charity trustee. So what's a trustee? Well, basically, if you're on sort of like the top committee, which is making decisions about that organisation, then you are a charity trustee. So if you've got a vote when there's a meeting or are seen to have a vote, then regardless of what you're called, you're a charity trustee. So for instance, you know, I talked about schools. Okay, most generally they're called school governors, but actually because the school itself is a charity, then actually they're also trustees in law. And this is where the word trustees comes from, is that actually it's trust law. So the law puts trust on trustees to use the charity's resources for its charitable purposes and to always act in its best interest. So you can see that sort of golden thread rule that I said right at the very beginning is running through that. That's basically what the role of a charity trustee is. So the basic duty is to make sure it's well run. So basically you're getting as many bangs for your bucks as possible. You're trying to create as much benefit as possible. So you need to be as efficient and as effective as possible. Yeah. Obviously to be solvent, so you can, pay all your dues. But it's also about, again, thinking about your beneficiaries. Your charity, if it's going to close tomorrow, you don't want it to cause harm to the beneficiaries that you're set up to support. Those of you who might have been interested in this the last few years, there was a big hoo-ha when Kids Company closed overnight. And there was all this thing about vulnerable young people basically being left high and dry. I know there was some debate at the time about how many young people we were talking about, but certainly that was one of the concerns. And that's true for charities. Again, it reflects the thing that they're different from a business. If a business goes bust, okay, well, we'll wail about people who haven't got their, haven't got their fridges on time, or their holiday flights have gone bust. But actually for charities, it's about, well, what difference is that going to make to the beneficiaries it was supposed to be supporting? So you need to be about being solvent. So sorry, trustees, you're going to have to get your head around finances at some point. I know a lot of us don't like that, but actually you need to have some basic understanding about the financial position of your charity. And then it's working towards its charitable purpose. This is very important, and I'll come to that onto that in a minute about what I mean by that. But that's your sort of golden thread for your charity, is understanding what its charitable purpose is. And yeah, basically the buck does stop with you. You've got to take ultimate responsibility. There's nobody else that you can blame. And you just need to be an active trustee so that you understand what's happening within your charity, so that if things do go wrong, you basically can show that you took an active interest, you asked the right questions. People can, people are very clever at pulling the wool over people's eyes, but at least you can show that you were trying to take an active part and you were being lied to, or people were disguising stuff. But actually, yes, there's no one else you can blame if things go wrong. Okay, this next section, I'm going to unpick these 6 duties. So the Charities Commission must read is the Essential Trustee, CC3. So there's a hyperlink there. And if nothing else, the Charity Commission expects trustees to have read and hopefully understood what's in CC3. Don't get put off if you look at it. It looks like it's like is it about 40 pages long, but actually there's quite a lot of, it's quite well spaced out. The language is not too bad, so it's not a read that will put you to sleep, but it's an okay thing to look at, and it separates trustees' duties into these 6. I've also put a hyperlink here to the Charity Commission's Trustee Welcome Pack, which seems to have slipped off the agenda. About 2 years ago, they were sending this pack to every new trustee. If you don't know, when you become a trustee, somebody within your charity then logs into Charity Commission and actually tells the Charity Commission that this person's a new trustee, and you have to give an email address if they've got one. And then they were sending this trustee welcome pack to every new trustee. I'm not sure it's happening all the time now, but anyway, the link there, it's quite a good, it's only about 10 pages long, but again, it's quite a good summary of being a charity trustee. So one thing you've got to make sure is that actually that you can be a trustee of the charity you're part of. There are certain people that the law excludes certain people. They're all listed in this trustee declaration, but the obvious ones are if you're an undischarged bankrupt, or if you've got an individual voluntary agreement with your creditors, then you can't be a charity trustee. If you've been found guilty of any crimes involving deception, you can't be a charity trustee. Some newer ones are being guilty of a terrorism offence, or you're on the sex offenders register. You can't be a charity trustee. And if you fall into any of those categories, once you are a charity trustee, you are supposed to resign as soon as possible. Okay. Now, the way you're appointed will depend on your governing document, and it's either going to be a constitution or articles of association. So in that, it will make it very clear how people become a charity trustee, and you need to check that actually either someone's going to be appointed that way or you've been appointed that way. If not, it can be challenged that in fact you weren't appointed correctly and therefore are not a trustee and shouldn't be taking part in any decision making. The other thing is that you've also got to meet HMRC's fit and proper persons test, which is all it is there's a link there. You just read it and basically sign that you aren't, again, an undischarged bankrupt or guilty of deception. It's very similar to the ones for charity law. It's just that because HMRC has to be different from every other government department, that they have their own test. And the reason for this is because charities do have some important tax exemptions. So they don't pay tax on any of their profits or surpluses, unlike private sector businesses. And if your charity works with children and or vulnerable people, if you're on what's called the barred list, that you shouldn't be in a paid job or a volunteer job with those people, then actually you can't also be a charity trustee. Okay, so first one, ensure your charity is carrying out its purposes for the public benefit. So you need to know what your charity can and can't do within its purposes. So in your governing document, your constitution, your articles, quite near the front, there will be a clause saying objects, the objects clause. And if nothing else, you should really try and memorize this from your constitution or articles, because actually you must make sure every decision that you make and everything that the charity does is within its objects. So I don't know if people can see that. This is the objects of one organization in this room, in this Zoom call. I think someone's still here. Does anybody recognize that? No, maybe somebody's not here who I thought would be here.
Rather long.
Actually, this was the shortest of the ones I had from here. So basically, this charity, so the charitable objects here are telling you who it benefits and in what ways. Okay. Can you, for instance, what can't they do? If you read that.
They can't really benefit an individual, can they? Because it's all multiples. It's like the community residents of. So I don't know.
Yeah, they could, as long as those individuals fall into those categories.
Okay.
But it's the public benefit test. There's got to be enough of them. You know, like for instance, if they would spend £50,000 on just helping somebody, for instance, learn how to dance, that could be challenged, unless, of course, what circumstances might that be justifiable to spend 50,000 on helping one person learn to dance?
I suppose if it's to advance their education in the arts, I suppose.
Could be, yes, as long as probably they didn't have the means to do it themselves. So yeah. Any other reasons that, for instance, it might cost that amount of money might be justifiable?
their level of need, as in their expertise, they're going up.
I think that's what Petula's saying, isn't it?
Professionalism, if
Yeah,
you see.
yeah, yeah, I think that's what Petula's saying.
Oh, beg your pardon,
Yeah,
sorry.
it could be quite an expense, you know, go to jump up to that level, they might need that amount.
Beg your pardon.
I was thinking, for instance, it depends on people. Some people, someone, for instance, might have a severe disability where they might actually need some stuff. You know, like for instance, obviously, in terms of sports, if you look at some people in disability sports, obviously some of their equipment is quite highly technical and probably costs an awful lot of money. What I was thinking of is that obviously it's got to be related to some of those things. So it's not the environment, isn't it? For instance, they wanted to do a litter pick. It might be brilliant for the area, but actually I can't see how that would be covered by the objects. And actually quite a lot of charities have actually probably, I think, have fallen foul of COVID, because actually an awful lot of people wanted to do something, you know, like food or taking people somewhere or raising awareness, and they were setting up things around particularly food, either you know, doing shopping and collection of prescriptions and things, but probably technically it was outside their charitable objects. And the Charity Commission kept on warning charities that actually make sure whatever you're using in your charitable resources is within your objects, however good it might be for your community and for people. If it's outside your objects, it's contrary to charity law, and therefore the charity trustees are acting outside of their duty to protect the assets of the charity. And what they were saying is, if you want to do that, then maybe think about changing your objects. It's not that objects are set in stone. You can change them. You can't do fundamental big changes. The Charity Commission would object to that, but actually, you know, slightly changing, and as long as it was within the spirit of the original setup of the charity, they will accept that. But that's what they were saying. And really, you as charity trustees need to know actually what the organisation is doing to fulfil those objects. You know, not in detail, big picture stuff, and feel confident that actually the activities that you're doing, and you can clearly understand how those activities are helping to bring about the charitable objects, and the difference it's making, and you're able to talk about them to people. Okay. Next bit is comply with your charity's governing document and the law. So governing document is either your constitution or your articles of association if you're a charitable company. So you need to be familiar with a governing document. You should have easy access to it. Some years ago, Charity Commission survey found that 1 in 10 trustees didn't have a copy of it. It's your Bible. It basically tells you what you can and cannot do, how decisions are made, how meetings have to be run so that they're valid. Because if you act outside your governing document, then again, any decisions that are made could be challenged. And it's likely to be somebody who wants to make trouble, you know, and they'll find a way of turning the knife. So you need to make sure that you're always following out, make sure you're following exactly how you should be doing things in your governing document, and check up every now and again. It's very easy to start slipping into ways of doing things, and then you start to think that that's the way it should be done, and then you actually reread your governing document and find, oh, we shouldn't be doing it that way. So you have to be up to date with filing accounts, returns, and any changes to your charity registration details. So as soon as you have to send in, you have to do an annual return. All charities have to do an annual return. If you're not a CIO, then you only have to send in your accounts once the income's over 25,000. But then you have to send in your accounts and your trustees' annual report. You still have to produce them. All charities have to produce them because you have to give them to a member of the public if they ask. But you only have to send them off to the Charity Commission if they're over £25,000. If you're a CIO though, then you have to send them every year to the Charity Commission. And you have to update them with any changes, like changes of trustees. And you should do that as soon as you can. And it's very easy to do. Somebody in your organisation, your charity, will have login details with the Charity Commission. Go in, they can take people off, add people, change the address of the charity and so on. And of course, as well, I'm talking about charity law mostly here, but there are other laws that apply to a charity. What other laws do you think apply to your charity besides charity law?
trustees?
Sorry?
Trustee law.
It's a subset of charity law.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. What other laws will cover the activities of your charity?
Human Rights Act.
Sorry, can I jump in?
Tula? Yeah.
Criminal law, certainly.
Yes,
So
Jill.
you shouldn't be doing anything that is illegal.
Yeah, exactly. Any subsets of that, particularly think about your organization, your charity. What other things might you be doing that are going to be covered by some sort of laws that could be illegal? How many people have got employees?
Oh, of course, so employment law.
Contracts, employment law, yeah.
Yeah, now I've broken the ice. What other laws might cover a charity?
Depends on what you're doing. Health and safety perhaps would come into play.
Yeah,
Governance, information, data.
Yeah, data
Data
protection.
security.
If you're working with children and vulnerable adults, what other laws are there? What laws are we talking about? What do you call those laws that cover children and vulnerable adults?
Not safeguarding, is it?
Yes, safeguarding. Yeah, safeguarding stuff. So actually, but you're not expected to be an expert. Very much the role of a trustee is to be a critical friend sometimes, particularly if you've got paid staff who do most of the day-to-day work. You need to basically say, well, actually, what else do we need to be aware of? What other laws are we doing here? Asking those sort of searching questions to make sure that your charity is abiding by the laws it needs to. And if you don't know, then it's expected that you go and find out from some other expert. Though you come to someone like me to get some initial opinions on something like safeguarding policy or data protection or even employment stuff. And then maybe if it's more complicated, you go and get that. So if it was employment, you'd probably go to an HR specialist, for instance. So you're not expected to be an expert, but you're expected to sometimes ask those searching questions about what your charity is doing, and then to just double check or get someone to double check that actually you're abiding by everything. Always act in your charity's best interests. So it's about making balanced, informed decisions and being prepared to question and challenge. So in a sense, it's the feeling that trustee meetings should be a healthy debating group. I have to say, if you end up just all nodding, I don't think you as a trustee board are working properly. And the reason might be that you've got groupthink, that maybe you're all friends and you think in the same way. Sometimes it's good to get some other people in the trustee board that have got slightly different views, so that actually you get some challenge and some debate, and hopefully we'll then get better decisions coming out of it. I know particularly those of us from a white Anglo-Saxon background, don't like conflict and debate. We try to avoid any sort of ill feeling, but actually it's something you as trustees have got to really try and make sure that there is some debate about some of the things that come to your board. What's important though is that there is a collective. You are a collective. So once a decision is made, charity law expects you to follow it. Regardless, even if you voted against it and you don't agree with it, you're expected to follow and support it, not to undermine it outside the meeting, for instance. If you don't like it, then really you should walk. If you feel it's a deal breaker, you should walk away from it. However, if you think that in fact it was an illegal decision, so for instance, someone might say, oh look, there's a friend of Joan here who can basically come in and fix the boiler, and we can give them 100 quid, no questions asked. Now we all know that paying people cash in hand is illegal. If you want to do that in your own house, in your own home, that's up to you. But actually, as a trustee board, you're not talking about your assets and your reputation. You're talking about the assets and reputation of the charity. So if a board says, oh no, we'll all do that, and you say, no, 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 I don't like that. And even if you say, and I want my disapproval minuted, that won't protect you if it goes wrong. If HMRC come in and they discover, in fact, you pay someone cash in hand, you know, they will basically fine you and stuff like that. If there's a personal liability, you will just have to share it in the same way as the other trustees, even though you voted against it. But if you think the illegal decision is so major, you should whistle blow. You know, like going to the Charity Commission, for instance. Petula.
So you're saying that the trustees have joint liability, so it's not severable. It's joint liability, regardless.
Well, it's actually severable and joint, actually. So people can be individually liable, but they can all be severally liable. It depends what it is, but yes. It's recognising and dealing with conflicts of interest. Now, all of us have conflicts of interest, regardless of some way. But it's the way you deal with them, and of course, you know, there's a very important case happening in the media at the moment, which changed in the last 48 hours about conflict of interest and how we deal with them and don't we deal with them. There's H5 is basically a summary of the Charity Commission guidance. And what I would say is that charity trustees is not only about the actual conflicts of interest, but the appearance of a conflict of interest, where actually your actions, your decisions could be seen by an outside party as being influenced because of your connection to another organisation or another individual, or even personal benefit. And I always say it's the tabloid test. If Dorset Echo, basically, sorry, the Daily Echo. The Daily Echo got hold of a story that says a decision was made by the trustees. One of the trustees is a close friend of somebody who got given a contract or got given a job. Then you should basically try and manage that in advance by, for instance, that person not being involved in the recruitment process. Sometimes it's impossible to manage it, but if you can manage it by them not being involved in a particular decision, then you should do so. If there's a big conflict of interest, like a pecuniary interest, so actually, you know, for instance, your brother applies for a job with the charity, you must not be involved in any of the recruitment process. That's very, very, very clear. The Charity Commission, so trustees usually can't get individual monetary benefit from a charity unless they're a beneficiary. So they can't be employed by a charity, but that extends to their close family and business partners. So brothers and sisters, parents, grandparents, children and grandchildren, and their, in charity law, it says spouses. In company law, it would be actually if you were living with someone as well. And I usually say to people, I think, you know, the courts for charity law would probably make that same extension. So you don't actually have to have a piece of paper to show that you are a spouse. If you are living together as a couple, then in fact that the connected person link is made. So for instance, you know, if your brother goes to be so for instance, I'll give you the example. So the charity that I'm a trustee of, one of our play workers is the wife of one of the trustees. So she was appointed because we did an open recruitment. We shortlisted 3 people and interviewed them. We used a scoring system to choose between. She was the best person on the day. And her husband was not involved in any way at all in the recruitment process. He wasn't involved in helping to draw up the job description. He wasn't on the interview or shortlisting panel. But we still had to get permission from the Charity Commission to appoint her. Because we used that evidence that she was the best person on the day, then they gave their approval for us to employ her. So this thing of recognising and dealing with conflicts of interest and what's called also conflict of loyalty is very important for charities. And as I said, it's always used the sort of tabloid test even though you think somebody can make a decision in the best interest of the charity, despite their connection with another organisation or a person, if the tabloids could make a story out of it, then it's probably best to recognise that there is a potential conflict there and therefore try and manage it. And ensuring trustee benefits are allowed, which is my example there. So trustees can claim reasonable travel expenses and other costs, like carer costs, for instance. They obviously, if they're undertaking activities like they've purchased materials, they've done photocopying, post. Oh, any of you still do posting stuff? Then it's fine for you to claim that back. But as I said, you can't usually be an employee. It's not about preserving the charity for its own sake. So again, any of the decisions that you make, it's about your beneficiaries and what is best for them, not about keeping the organisation going. And it's not serving personal interests. Okay, shall we take a 10-minute break at that point? Yeah, so back here at 10 past, is that all right? Just under 10 minutes, is that okay?
Yeah.
Yep, good, okay. Now, the problem is when people are muted and they haven't got their camera on, I can't see if everyone's back and won't know if they're all back.
I'm here.
Who was that?
Here.
Claire, I'm here.
Here too. Yeah.
Joan, I'm here.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'll crack on then. So the next one is manage your charity's resources responsibly. So this is about your role in terms of managing risks, protecting assets and people. So again, this is about not necessarily you knowing the detail, but again, asking those questions to make sure that risks of the charity, that everything that you have is being protected as much as it can, and the people, and that's staff and volunteers. And reputation I put into brackets because Charity Commission quite rightly puts an awful lot of emphasis that your reputation is an important asset, usually because most charities are asking for donations of time and money, and most of them couldn't exist without that. And therefore, if your reputation is tarnished, very quickly those will dry up. So actually, thinking about your reputation is just as important as thinking about, well, is the money locked away, and have we asset marked our laptops and things like that. So the trustee is about getting the resources your charity needs. So again, that's money, it could be volunteer time, it could be equipment. But again, your role is to ask those questions about, well, what resources do we need? How are we going to get them? How well are we getting them? Are there better ways of doing it? So you don't necessarily have to get the resources, it's to make sure the resources are being got. Okay. And it's about having appropriate controls and procedures. Like, as I said at the beginning, okay, the buck stops with you. You have to take ultimate responsibility, but you can't be everywhere all the time. You can't be there 24/7. You can't micromanage. So it basically means that you decide on policies and procedures and controls, and you try to make sure that everyone within the charity knows about them. And maybe sometimes checking up, if you're a bigger charity, maybe trying to think about checking up that, for instance, the financial procedure is being followed, or the safeguarding measures are being followed. Okay. There's a special rules about land and buildings, but it's only usually if you own them or if you've got a lease of more than 7 years. If you don't have any land or buildings, or it's on a short-term basis, you don't have to worry. But as soon as you actually own buildings or have a lease of more than 7 years, there are very special rules for charities. Again, it's for you to think about it, so that if it ever comes up at a trustee meeting, you can ask that question, well, are we following charity law on this? And if you don't, then it means you've probably got to talk to an expert. It's probably a solicitor. And of course, you've got responsibility for and to staff and volunteers, because they're your agents that are doing the stuff on the ground. But again, you're probably about having proper controls and procedures in place. You can't line manage everybody. You can't know everybody. Once you get to a bigger charity, it's impossible to do that. While you're very small, it is possible. Once you start growing, though, it becomes almost impossible for you to know about that. So you're going to have to delegate stuff to other people. When you get to a certain size, then obviously charities take on paid staff, and they might end up some of them might be managing other staff and managing volunteers. But it's about your responsibility to make sure that that's being done legally, responsibly, and as well as possible. It's about acting with reasonable care and skill, and it's about using your skills and experience. That's all it would be expected. The person in the street would expect that you use those skills and experience that you've got. It's the same thing as about managing your own affairs, of using that same skills and experience and any expertise you have when you're making decisions about your charity. Recognizing basically, where your knowledge ends, and therefore you need expert advice from others. It's about it's not just coming to the meetings, it's probably just getting ready for it. If your meetings are being done according to good practice, you should be getting an agenda, at least a week before the meeting, perhaps with some papers for you to think about some of the issues and the decisions that are being made, so that actually you can come prepared for that meeting with questions and maybe some suggestions. And of course that helps to make meetings go smoother as well, rather than all of you umming and ahhing for half an hour because you're trying to get your head around a particular bit of information, if you've actually had time to think about it before you turn up for the meeting. But because you are, at the end of the day, ultimately responsible, you need to make sure that you get the information you need, particularly financial and management. Remember, you are in charge, so that, if a treasurer or if a chief exec or a manager is not providing the information you need, you are in your rights to demand and to have it in a way that makes sense to you, because you're the ones that have got to make the final decision on it. So it's usually about negotiating, particularly financial information. Is that, as I said earlier, a lot of us don't really want to can't get our head around figures, but you need to perhaps talk to whoever's producing the reports to you, so that they're presented in a way that makes sense to you, so that you can make considered decisions on them. And there's also about being prepared in case something goes wrong. I know we can never tell what thing's going to happen, and but actually sometimes at least thinking about maybe some of the more likely, like obviously if you are working with children and vulnerable adults, it's likely at some point you're going to have some sort of safeguarding concern. of somebody within your organization. You know, we don't want to recognize that, but actually it will happen in nearly most organizations. It might be quite minor. Happily, it will never be very major, but actually, you know, there will be an issue, and it's about thinking about actually how that's going to be managed when it happens. Ensure your charity is accountable. It depends who they are. So legal, accounting, reporting requirements. So I've already said that that actually most charities have got to do some reporting to the Charity Commission. But there might be other reporting requirements as well, depending on, you might be registered. So if you're a childcare organisation, you're going to have to do reporting requirements to Ofsted, for instance. If you're involved in some form of adult social care, it might be somewhere like CQC, for instance. So you're going to have to do some reporting requirements too. So you just need to be aware of actually who you've got to send reports to, and again ask that questions, you know, who's going to do this and when's it going to happen, and probably getting a report back to say it has happened. So for instance, I'm the company secretary for CAN, so I file our accounts and trustees annual report with the Charity Commission and with Companies House, and basically at the next trustee board, part of my report is to say, and I made these filings. Being able to show that your charity complies with the law and is effective. That's another reason for having written down policies and procedures, because at least you can show that you as a trustee board has signed off on various policies and procedures, and that you've told all your staff and volunteers this is the way you've got to do something. Now, as I said, you know, they can choose not to do it, but at least you've got that defence that in fact you agreed these policies and procedures that actually did follow the law, and actually, you know, this member of staff or this volunteer, you know, basically found ways to get around the policy or procedure. Some of your charities, you might actually have voting members outside of your trustee board, and in those cases you'll probably have to do reporting to them, usually an AGM. Some charities you don't have voting members, so it doesn't apply to you, but there are other people who have an interest in the charity. You know, it might be your funders, for instance. You might have regular supporters that actually you should be sending information to. There might be organisations that work in a similar field to you, and you have a very close working relationship with them. So you as trustees will want to make sure that there's a good sort of reporting communication with those stakeholders, and you know, making sure the staff and volunteers are accountable to the board. You don't want to get into that situation where, you know, the staff and the volunteers are over here doing this stuff and the trustees are over here doing something different, and it's down to you to sort of make sure that actually everyone's working together. And although it sounds like you have to do an awful lot of reporting and accountability, I agree with the Charity Commission, but you should accept that as an opportunity. Trustees have got a huge amount of trust and confidence from the public, far more than any other institution, really. It's usually the NHS and the police that sort of get better ratings than charities do. And the reason we can say that is because we have this quite strict legal structure that we have to work within, and there's an awful lot of public accountability. If you've never looked at it, if you look at the Register of Charities on the Charity Commission website, all 170,000 charities are listed there. And for each one, there are some basic details about the organisation, what it does. If it has filed its accounts and trustees a report, they're there for the last 5 years. The names of the trustees are there, not their addresses, but their names are there. And some other basic information as well, some of their policies and procedures. And that should increase our confidence that charities are working there for the public benefit. Also, it means that actually charities that start acting against charity law are dealt with. So actually, you know, we don't have many rotten apples in the barrel. So it protects us all. Right. Well, I've come to the end of those 6. And I know sometimes it can seem that actually, God, this is such a complicated system of rules and regulations and what I can and cannot do. But it's like anything in life. Actually, there are always complicated rules and regulations, like the highway, being out in the road, whether we're a motorist, whether we're a cyclist, whether we're a pedestrian. There are lots of rules and regulations that are there to keep us all safe. And most of us know it automatically now, but at one point we had to learn it, but then it becomes ingrained into us. So actually don't get worried that there is all this stuff and therefore, oh, I'll give up now. You know, stick with it, and actually you will learn all this. And as long as you have that basic principle about always acting in the best interest of your charity and beneficiaries, that's the golden thread. And all the other stuff is a bit of detail that is quite useful. And it is useful to understand it because it also helps you to deal with people within your charity that might actually want to not act in the best interests of the charity, because you can point to this saying, look, charity law says this, the Charity Commission guidance says we cannot do this. This is not the way of doing it. So it's a very useful tool to challenge and maybe to get rid of people who aren't actually working in the best interests of your charity. So don't be put off by what looks like a very complicated, very hideous, very set of rules and procedures. Really, you know, you'll pick it up as you go along, just like you do in going out. This is Russell Square in London, if any of you have recognised it. My old haunt. I used to work not very far from here. People do ask about risks, though. So what's good? In all cases, financial liability will be met by the charity. Okay, so although you're individually and severally liable, actually financial liability is usually picked up by the charity. The only time there's going to be a problem if you're what's called an unincorporated charity, which none of you are, which is quite lucky. This is like being a sole trader. The difference between being a sole trader and a company. So if you're a sole trader and your business goes down the tubes, then actually your own personal assets could be at risk from your creditors, people you owe money to. You know, they could go after your house, they could go after your car and any of your other possessions to pay the debts of your business. Whereas when you become a company and you go down the tubes, even if you own squillions, then actually the people you owe money to can just whistle in the wind. Basically, they can't do anything about it unless they can show that you built up that debt knowingly. But that's why people spend millions on very good accountants to show that actually, no, we didn't do that. And this is a quote from CC3. Recognise that most trustees are volunteers who sometimes make honest mistakes. Trustees are not expected to be perfect. They're expected to do their best to comply with their duties. Charity law generally protects charities who have acted honestly and reasonably. So if you've got good minutes that show that you made, you know, why you made a decision, and if it turns out it was an honest mistake, then you've got it down in writing that actually at the time you did consider it, you did do what you thought was the best thing at the time. It just so happens that actually maybe it was wrong. But that means that actually the courts will relieve you of responsibility and liability. I have to say that there have been hardly any cases of where trustees have been held liable in the courts. It's only when they've done something knowingly, okay, when absolutely knowingly. The rare cases that trustees may face personal liability is where they've done something knowingly, like, for instance, you know, there have been charities where they have paid people cash in hand, cleaners being the classic example, particularly friends of trustees, and they've paid them cash in hand. HMRC have gone in, they fined them, and the Charity Commission quite rightly has turned around and said, well, actually that fine should be paid by the trustees, not by the charity, because everyone knows that paying cash in hand is contrary to tax law, and therefore you shouldn't have done it. So there's going to be only those sort of times when it can be clearly shown that trustees knowingly did something wrong. So the way you minimise the risks is knowing what's being done in your name. Not always easy, but at least, you know, you can try and make it clear that if someone else is going off to be a spokesperson or doing something, you've made it very clear to them what they can and cannot do and say. Again, I keep on me to talk about policies and procedures. You know, you can't be everywhere. So if you've got clear policies and procedures that you've made sure everyone knows about and understands, if they go against them, well, generally that's down to them and not necessarily your fault. And always act honestly and reasonably within your governing document and seek professional advice when needed. You know, it sort of summarises it. As long as you can feel hand on heart that the decision you've made was based on the evidence that you had, the right one to make, then you are protected. But you just need to know the boundaries of your expertise and knowledge and seek professional advice when needed. Insurance is obviously a good way of covering quite a few risks. The Charity Commission does expect you to take out, for instance, insurance against property and equipment, particularly expensive equipment, and obviously public liability. All charities, even if you don't have any staff and it's only volunteers, and you don't have any buildings, you should have public liability insurance just in case somebody has an accident and they can show negligence. Otherwise, you know, the charity itself will have to pay out the awards in a court case as rather than the insurance company. So insurance is a must for nearly all for all charities, and just make sure you've got the right adequate insurance for what you're doing. Incorporation, I've talked about this issue about, you know, if you're the difference between a sole trader and a company. In the charity world, incorporated charities are either going to be charitable companies like CAN. I'm not sure whether Hammersley Homes is a charitable company or not, or a CIO, charitable incorporated organisation, which is becoming the default charity legal structure, to be honest. I think about 80% of all new charities now are CIOs. It was brought in the 2006 Charity Act, because in the past, if you wanted the limited liability of a company and be a charity, you had to be a charitable company like CAN. So we're a company limited by guarantee, so we're registered with Companies House, but we're also a registered charity with a Charity Commission. It means we have to follow company law and charity law. And people felt that that was a bit of duplication and a bit extra admin work. So the Charity Act for 2006 brought in the CIO, which is very similar to a company structure, but you only have to report to the Charity Commission and you only have to follow charity law. But I think all of you fit into an incorporated model. But I'll send you these handouts anyway, so that you can understand the difference between the two types. So what was the basic principle? Right from the very beginning.
To act within your knowledge, and then if you go for expert advice and know your boundaries. Is that the one you're meaning?
Nope. There's
Okay.
one right at the very beginning.
Oh. Basic principle of a trustee or of a charity?
Basic principle of a trustee.
Is it to act in the best interest of the charity
And its beneficiaries.
and
Yes.
its beneficiaries?
Yeah, yeah. So the golden thread, so always throughout, yeah. Always act in the best interest of your charity and its beneficiaries. But as I said, if you knowingly not act in the best interest of the charity or illegally, you will be liable. Okay, and Charity Commission, so it might do an inquiry. It then has the ability to pass information on to enforcement agencies, generally the police, that will take action. So if they become aware, for instance, of a charity trustee that's, you know, been engaged in some sort of fraudulent activity, they'll pass that on, or if it's been safeguarding issue, for instance. So for instance, there was a trustee that was found guilty of sexual abuse of some of the beneficiaries, because basically a safeguarding concern had been raised to the Charity Commission. They did an investigation. They found out that the chair had been involved in abusing some of the beneficiaries, and some of the other trustees knew about it but didn't do anything about it. And so the Charity Commission basically banned the chair and some of the other trustees from being a charity trustee, but they obviously passed their evidence on to the police, and the police then took out a successful prosecution against the chair, and they were jailed. I can't remember how long for. So again, you know, if it can be shown that they've knowingly done something illegal, then the Charity Commission will pass on any information it has to the appropriate enforcement agency. So a bit about being an effective trustee. Well, it's a key quality, I think, is sometimes having the courage to ask the seemingly stupid question. I think I've said about that the good thing about a trustee board is there should be a bit of debate, a bit of discussion. And sometimes that could be asking questions, which sometimes you might feel reticent because you think everyone else will be thinking stupid. But quite often, if you've got that question in your head, probably somebody else in the room has as well. The Charity Commission has this infographic of like 15 questions trustees should ask. I don't think you should ask them at every single meeting, but they feel, you know, over the course of a year or 2 years, maybe these questions ought to come up. And some of these are more pertinent for some of you than others. Like, for instance, I don't know how many of you have got permanent endowments. Probably none of you have got a permanent endowment. That's a big wodge of money that's in a bank account, or no, in stocks and shares, that's generating interest or an income then that you use. But you know, are we making the best use of our staff and volunteers? Is a question that's quite good for you to do. What effect is the current economic climate having on our charity and its activities? An awful lot of charities are having to do that because of COVID having affected their fundraising, for instance. What else have we got here? Are we financially strong enough to continue to provide services for our beneficiaries? Are we an effective trustee body? Now, these are all sort of, you know, searching questions that should be, the Charity Commission feels that trustee boards should be thinking. So you'll get this in the handout. You should have some key copies of key documents. The handout will have things, so there are obviously things like the Constitution or articles, but there could be other things as well, you know, some important policies and procedures, minutes of meetings, obviously. If you've got any subcommittees, minutes of those and terms of reference. But I'll send this list to you. So it's really as part of your induction as a new trustee, it's good for you to have that, and then you can add new documents with time. And hopefully you're going to be an active trustee, not a participant, not a prisoner or a passenger. I have to say quite a lot of trustees end up because they've had a tap on the shoulder. And basically they don't want to say no to a friend and let them down. And but basically they're not giving their time and energy and commitment to the charity. They need to be an active participant because, you know, well, two reasons. One is you don't want to waste your time by going to meetings and thinking, you know, when you want to be somewhere else. But also, you know, if things don't go wrong and you haven't been an active trustee, then you're going to be just as liable and responsible as the rest of the trustee board. And I think, you know, every decision you make, you think about, will this help us deliver our charitable purpose, and is it the best way? So that's why I was saying that trying to learn off by heart your charitable objects is probably one of the things you should try and do, so that you can always think about, well, actually, can we do that within the objects? And then the next question is, actually, is that the best way of doing it? Like any organization, you can get into tram lines, really, where you can carry on doing the same thing for year on, year out. But you as a trustee sometimes should try and raise your head above a parapet, or look ahead and think about, well, actually, okay, well, we've been doing this for 10 years. It's good, but actually, is there a different way of doing it that actually might might create more benefit. And it's about keeping the big picture in mind. Now, I know for very small charities, you'll also be active volunteers, but you need to try and recognise that you've got two hats. That actually, when you're a volunteer for the charity, you're going to be helping delivering the day-to-day stuff. But when you're there as a trustee, you're supposed to be thinking about strategic long-term things, not about, you know, how do we get together for the next fundraising session, or what materials do we need for the next educational session. But it's about, you know, where are we going to be in 2 years' time? What's our budget for the year? Where are we going to get that money from? So it's trying to think ahead rather than tomorrow or next week. And it's the difference between, the subtle difference between governance, which is making sure things happen, and management, which is about making things happen. So you as trustees are there as critical friends, trying to ask those questions about who's going to do this, has it happened? Yeah. Not, I'm going to do this and I've done it. Yeah. Again, when you're in, it's easier, in a sense, it's a bit easier in bigger organizations, because usually you've got your trustee board and then you've probably got your staff and volunteers, and the staff and volunteers basically do all the doing. And you're there sort of being the critical friend, getting reports and maybe asking searching questions. But when you're a smaller organization and you're also going to be active volunteers, it's good maybe to, for instance, have two separate meetings, you know, or two halves of a meeting. So your first bit might be your trustee bit, where you're talking about strategic stuff, policies, procedures, you know, your finances, and you do that for half an hour. And then the next hour might be organising the fundraising fate, or putting together resources for our information pack, which is all about doing. Yeah. So you try and separate the two, because quite often you find that the doing bit takes over from the governance bit and you lose that. So it's about setting and monitoring strategic aims and direction. You know, the long term, where are we going? Where are we heading for? Ensuring there's strong management of its money, assets and reputation, and linked to that, you've got effective systems, safeguards and controls. So you set up the safeguard controls, but you need to make sure that that's being followed through. And again, asking questions about, you know, if it's not being followed, why is it not being followed? Is it just that the policy and procedure is wrong, and therefore we need to change it? Or is it that staff and volunteers need more training? Or do we need some upskilling in something? Quite like this one from Mike Hudson, which tries to sort of show sort of two sides of governance and management. So, you know, governance is setting the vision, mission and values, and then management works within them, establish and monitor policies, and then, you know, develop and ensure implementation of them. Like, for instance, quite typically in a bigger organization, for instance, you know, the chief exec might bring a draft policy to a trustee board, and the trustee board is a bit like the critical friend, tries to unpick it, ask some questions about what does this mean, so to make sure that actually it's going to be a clear and effective policy. Anyway, that's quite a useful thing, I think, to try and show too. So there's a number of things for good practice, and it's proportionality. It depends how big and complicated a charity you are, but I think it's a good idea that all trustees have a role description, and particularly if you've got officer posts. So as well as a general trustee role description, there might be one for the chair, secretary, treasurer, or any other sort of officer post. So it's very clear about what's expected of them, what they can and cannot do, particularly if you're delegating to a chair or to a treasurer, because they are only delegations. And you might want a code of conduct as well. Again, so it sets out very clear standards of behaviour and ways of working. Also, obviously, quite good for then disciplining trustees when they step out of line. It's much more difficult if you haven't got something written down to say to someone, actually, you shouldn't be behaving or doing that, or that's not the right way of doing it. But again, it depends how complicated an organisation you are. Trustees really should have some form of induction. Quite often it's a sink or swim. come and join the trustee board. And you sit there for like 4 meetings before you start to suddenly get an idea about what's happening. So, you know, should spend a bit of time with a new trustee, telling them the background and what live issues there are at the moment, so that they feel like they can contribute as soon as possible. You know, some trustees do regular skills audit, because that might help to identify where you've got some gaps around the board, and therefore you can do some active recruitment to attract a trustee to fill those gaps. You might want to think about appraisal and training. Always good sometimes once a year to try and step away from decision making. I say an away day, but it could just be a 1-hour meeting where really you're just thinking about the charity. You know, you might want to quick look at your constitution just to see whether it needs a tweaking. You know, I have worked in the last couple of years with charities whose constitution was unchanged since the 50s and 60s. One, it's hopelessly out of date legally, but also it misses a whole lot of other things that cause for concern. But also thinking long term about what are the objects, aims and priorities of the charity. So by taking some time out once a year is a good way of moving that forward. There are a couple of governance tools that can be good to help you think about becoming a better trustee board. There's this simple 7 things of hallmarks of an effective charity, which I'll send you with, and there's a hyperlink. There is a thing called the Good Governance Code, which was put together by a consortium of national voluntary sector umbrella bodies. Quite detailed, but again, it has some checklists. You know, actually, a good trustee board does this, and you can evidence that by A, B, and C. So it can be quite good sometimes to have a good look at. And then NCVO, which is the sort of, I guess, the largest umbrella organisation for voluntary organisations in England and Wales, have got these charity ethical principles. And in fact, if you go to the CAN website, you've got a set of values that we have, and they were based very much on the charity ethical principles. If you want to, there are some quality standards out there. Trusted Charity Essentials is free. It's basically an online checklist that you go through, and you know, basically it gives you a bit of a report at the end about what you're weak on, whether it's financial management, people management, making good decisions, looking after assets, looking after reputation, communication, that sort of stuff. And then Trusted Charity is a quality standard that you can do, again, a self-assessment. It's more detailed than the Trusted Charity Essentials, but it can lead on, if you want to pay for an independent assessment, and then you can get a good stamp. There's a very good online free thing called the Charity Excellence Model. Again, they're all very similar. You know, they basically have checklists about how you operate as a charity. CAN does an organisational health check for you, which is free. So I come through and go through like a dose of salts and look at everything you do, look at your paperwork, and basically say, no, you need to, this is good, or this is, you know, you could do better, and this is how you could do it better. I'm not sure any of you are thinking about becoming a trustee, but I think this is useful. Before jumping in, I think what you should do, if you're thinking about becoming a trustee, is, you know, find out what the charity does. You know, do you support its aims and objectives? If you don't feel a sort of buzz for what the charity does, then I don't think you're really going to be a good trustee for it. You've got to feel a bit of the fire for what the charity is trying to do, the difference it's trying to make. Obviously, check on its finances. You know, is it solvent or is it about to go under? What's its legal structure and possible individual liability? So this is this thing about, is it like a sole trader, where in fact you might be liable financially if anything goes wrong, in the same way a sole trader does. Try and get an idea of time commitment. I always say to charities that are advertising for trustees, try and put a time commitment on it, because quite often people are reticent. They think if I become a trustee, I'm going to be doing it 24/7, 365 days of the year. Whereas if you can tell them actually minimum we expect is like 4 hours a month, then that can allay a lot of people's worries and concerns. You know, what can you offer the charity? It is a two-way street. You're going to learn an awful lot from being a charity trustee. But actually, hopefully you can bring some expertise and knowledge as well. Ask about expenses. It might be a thing. You don't have to claim expenses, but for some of you it might be important. And also there is a good tax wheeze. Most charity trustees don't claim their expenses, but actually they could claim their expenses and then they could gift aid them back to the charity, and the charity would benefit by 25%, as long as you're a taxpayer, of course. But totally legit for you to do that. I think ask about induction, support and training, and of course suck it and see. You know, say, well, I'll try it for a year, or I'll try it for a couple of meetings, and then I'll make a firmer commitment. Don't feel you're being railroaded and therefore can't escape. You do become a prisoner. I'll send you a handout about this as well. So help and support. So obviously I'm here offering advice and support, and there is some pages on our website about being a charity trustee, and we do have a trustee network, and that's being linked to this survey. So as I said, when I send you this and all the other stuff, I'll put in the link to the online survey for trustees. Obviously at the end of the day, Charity Commission has got the definitive guidance on there, but it's difficult to find stuff. I would always just Google. Don't try and start from the Charity Commission homepage, because you probably won't find what you're looking for. So put in like Charity Commission and then whatever question you're looking for, and you'll probably more likely and probably quicker find what you're looking for. But I have to say, you know, I'm on this almost all the time, and I still haven't got my head around where things are on their structure. NCVO has got quite a lot of stuff. It's got a section called Know How Non-Profit, and there's quite a lot of good free stuff. You don't have to be a member for quite a lot of it. You can become a member, which is free for smaller organisations, and then get access to more. But there's quite a lot of free stuff on there. Small Charity Coalition, I put that there. They used to have stuff for free, but now you have to become a member. It's not very expensive, but it has got some good stuff for charity trustees. That's our membership. I think most of you are members anyway. Right, I've come to the end of my spiel. So have you got any final questions or anything you want to ask me? Free for all.
I quite like the idea when you said about right towards the end, about like the audit that you can do. So how do we go about asking you to come and do that? Do we just literally ask you directly, or do we book it, or how's best to do it?
I think I've got a meeting coming up soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So don't worry. Yes, Axfast have already asked me.
Oh, that's all right then. That's fine. Yeah, that's good.
So I've got a meeting coming. I can't see where I've got the diary, but I know that's one of the things I'm going to be talking about.
Oh, that's all right then. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Anyone else got any burning issues? I know it's probably a lot to take in, particularly on an evening. But as I said, you'll have my contact details, so that if something suddenly occurs to you, you can always bang me an email or give me a ring. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry we were a select few tonight. Only 5 of you out of the 11 that were booked in. I've had a look. I haven't seen any emails for any last minute things, but hopefully that's been okay. I'll be sending you, as I said, a copy of this presentation plus lots of handouts and also a link to the trustee survey, and also hopefully a link to the recording as well, so that you can go, and you can obviously share it with any other trustees within your own organisation, if they might find that useful. The next one of these is probably going to be in February. I tend to do them 3 times a year, but it's the next one is likely to be February. So just to finish off, what's the basic principle? I should ask this in chorus, shouldn't I?
Always act in the best interest of the charity and its beneficiaries.
Yes. Okay. So as I said, if that's the one thing you take away from tonight, then really you'll be fine as a charity trustee, and always ask that question. Okay. Well, with that, stay in touch, and evaluation. I'll send you a link to a very simple evaluation form in the email as well for you to fill in if you could. That'd be really helpful for us, for ourselves internally, but also for our funders. And enjoy being a trustee. I've been a trustee really all my adult life, so more than 40 years, and amongst all the anxiety and heartache, I've really enjoyed it. It's really great to see the difference that the charities that I've been involved with can make. And I think that's the things to always hold on to as being a charity trustee through the bad times, is remembering the great work that your charity does, and that actually is worth all the time and effort. Okay, well, with that, thanks a lot, and look out for your email in the next day or 2. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really interesting.
Appreciated.
Yeah. Good.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.